About 20 years ago, I was fast asleep in my hotel room in downtown Los Angeles. I was getting up the next morning to give a speech for a company called World Financial Group. This is around 2004, I believe. And I get a call in my room, wakes me up, and I said, hello, and he said, hey, is this Steve Siebold? And I said, yes. And he said, this is Patrick Bet-David, and I'm in your hotel in the lobby at the bar, and you have to meet me down here because I have questions for you about your book, 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. And I said, it's midnight. I'm asleep. I've got to give a speech in the morning. He said, I know I'm going to be at your speech. That's why I have questions for you before. I said, it's midnight. He said, no, I've got all these questions for you. I really have to ask you. I'm getting started here in this company, and I really want to talk to you. And I normally would not have gotten out of my hotel room for a stranger, but he was so energetic, and I could tell he was a young guy in his 20s, and he sounded so ambitious, and he was so insistent that I literally woke up, got dressed at midnight, and went down to the bar to talk to this kid. And so we talked for about an hour, and he had some really good questions, and he obviously was super ambitious, and I was inspired by that. And he said he had come from Iran and told me a little bit about a story in the military. And I think at the time he was working with the World Financial Group, but I think he was also a trainer at the local gym. He had mentioned something about that. I think that's what he was doing at the time. So anyway, he was going to be in my audience speaking the next day. And so he asked me all these questions, and then about an hour later, I said, I got to go to sleep. And he said, oh, thanks a lot, I appreciate it. And then I went back up to sleep. And I don't know, probably a couple years later, I bumped into him again. He was doing a little better in World Financial Group, but he was making some money. And I got to know him a little bit, and I helped him out with his team a little bit, trying to coach some of his people. And then a few years later, he calls me up and says, I'm going to start a new company. And I'm calling it PHP, People Helping People. And I want you to help me put together some of these things. I said, why are you starting a new company? He says, well, I want to save America. And I said, save America from what? And I don't think he ever really clearly answered that, but that was his, he was very ambitious. And it's inspiring, when an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, it's inspiring with other entrepreneurs. You see that young, he's a kid, he's in his 20s. And he was just really ambitious, and I was inspired by that. So I said, sure, well, any way I can help you, I will. So he put together a manual, something like this, a PHP manual. I don't know if this is the one, but they have lots of them. They usually do them once a year, twice a year, or once every couple of years. And so he quoted me in the manual, and I helped him put some of it together, and he recommended my books and that kind of thing. And he got started, and he hired me to speak at one of his conventions, probably 10, 12 years ago in Las Vegas, and his people were fantastic, and he had probably, a couple thousand people there, I guess. And again, very inspiring, a lot of young people, a lot of minorities getting started in his company. It's a network marketing company for financial services, effectively. And it was great, it's fantastic. And we were in his suite at the hotel, and he said, oh, this company's going to be huge and everything. And, again, still very, very ambitious. And, he was always a very good speaker. He's a very articulate guy. And for someone with a very limited education, a formal education, he gets his message across very effectively. And, I thought that was fantastic. Well, a few years went by, and I communicated on and off with him, but obviously he was very busy and kind of taking over the world with his company, which I thought was always really great. And then I think last year he sold his company to Integrity, another company, and and exited with a bunch of money and started his podcast. And not just last year, but he'd been on YouTube with his Valuetainment. I had dinner with him one time in LA, and he showed me a studio before they moved, and all good things. And then now, today, recently, just last week, I saw him on Bill Maher. Now, I'd probably been on every television show in the country in America, and most of the major ones around the world, or many of the major ones around the world. But Bill Maher was a show I could never get on. And Patrick was on the podcast, Bill Maher's podcast, which is great. And I saw him on there because I watched that podcast on YouTube, and I think he did a good job. And I thought it was just amazing that he got on the Bill Maher show. It's a show I've never been able to get on. And of course now he's got so many followers. I understand how he got on there, which is great. And so I texted him, and I hadn't talked to him in years, and I just said, hey, great job. And he just said thanks, and that was great. And so who really is Patrick Bet-David? in my opinion, as an outsider, I don't have any connections to Patrick. I mean, I've known him for 20 years, but I don't have any financial connections or anything like that. And the purpose of this is just because he's got millions of followers now. He's got a lot of influence now. And so a lot of people, I get a lot of questions about him because people somehow find out that, I had known him over the years or whatnot. And here's who I think he really is. He's an ambitious young guy, still a young guy, who now has millions of followers and lots of influence, huge podcasts, and I said that in the message I sent him the other day after I saw the Bill Maher show. I said, it's amazing what you've done, and I really mean that. It is amazing. His ambition alone drove him to this point where he has a seat effectively through the media on the world stage, which is no small feat. Believe me, as someone who's worked with the media for many, many years, that's not an easy thing to do. Hardly anyone has ever done it. There are Harvard-educated professors, people from the Ivy League. People that have done, have changed the world that don't have that kind of influence that Patrick Bet-David now has. That's pretty astounding for one. But it's a testament to his ambition and his work ethic. He's a very hardworking guy. That said, I'd probably disagree with everything he says philosophically, politically, and I hope that as he gets older, he will come around to a more broad view of the world as he travels hopefully around the world and sees the rest of the world outside of America and the far right, that he becomes a more sophisticated commentator. That's just my personal opinion, just one person's opinion. But that's my hope. But I will say that he has even though we disagree on almost everything, except being an entrepreneur, we agree on that, of course, that's how we met. He has a really good heart. I will say that. We would probably, if we ever debated on a stage together, we would disagree with almost everything outside of being an entrepreneur, and probably some financial things we'd agree on. Everything else we would disagree on that I've heard him say, literally, including on the Bill Maher show. But that said, I've debated a lot of people. And you probably watched a lot of people out there with whom you disagree. Patrick has a good heart. He really does care about people. And I've seen that over a course of 20 years. Again, even though we disagree on so many things, someone I think either has a really good heart. In other words, he's got a heart for people. He really does care about people. And the criticism that he's just all about money, money, money is really an unfair criticism because I hadn't really seen that with him. Sure, he's made a lot of money. He's earned it. He's worked really hard. He had some good breaks like the rest of us. And but he's not just about the money. He really does care about people. And I hope that will transfer to broadening his worldview and perspective and education where he sees a little bit bigger picture. But, we'll see what happens. But I have hope for that because he does have a good heart. Bottom line, to wrap this up, in my opinion, this is a good guy that is living, even though, he just came to the United States not that long ago, as a kid, but still it's not that long ago. He's not that old. He made the American dream come true. And he's got a seat at the table, the national table, if not eventually the international table again. No small feat. He deserves a ton of credit. And I am, without sounding, at the risk of sounding condescending toward Patrick, I'm proud of him. Though we disagree on so many things. I'm proud of him because he got himself a seat at the table. That is not a small thing to do. So congratulations to Patrick Bet-David. If you're someone looking at PHP, his old company that's now owned by Integrity, you want to give that careful consideration because it's got a real entrepreneurial bent to it. The people are really great. And again, I think it follows the heart of what Patrick set out to do, which was to help people. So just some thoughts on Patrick Bet-David.